I think most of us would agree fascism is a bad thing, very bad thing, but the British government seem to be quite keen on gradually turning the UK into a fascist state. Now you might think, Riley, that sounds ridiculous, what are you going on about? That's just typical lefties exaggerating the whole situation. Well, this story might change your mind. An update to the Official Secrets Act that the government are proposing, specifically the Home Office, headed by Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, would make it a crime to release stories that are embarrassing for the government as a journalist. Journalists could face up to 14 years in prison. Now, when we say embarrassing, it's because it's so vague that although the Official Secrets Act is supposed to protect the country against people releasing information that is of national security, and so you shouldn't be leaking that kind of thing, potentially. But as we know, even things like that can sometimes be important. Whistleblowers have pointed out those kind of things before and exposed government war crimes in the Middle East, often when it comes to Western governments like the UK and the US. But in this instance, it's now, you could literally release information that the government is keeping under wraps, that just reflects badly on them, and potentially face up to 14 years in prison. Now, if that sounds terrifying to you, it's because it should. This government has already made a lot of inroads on our civil liberties. The right to peacefully protest has now been significantly reduced in this country, and the government is aiming at disenfranchising, I think it's about 2 million people in the country, by implementing voter ID laws without providing everyone official government voter ID, which is quite expensive. It can cost them upwards of £70. So for people who are on a very low income, people who are on benefits, disabled people who are on universal credit, and even a lot of people in working families will find it very, very difficult to be able to get that so they can vote. The government have also implemented legislation that legalises rape and torture if it's done by undercover agents of the state. So this is all very, very authoritarian, and to claim that the Conservative Party is a party of freedom and liberty is, I think, at the very least, pretty misguided and ignorant at this point. And at most, you're just lying, because they're clearly not. This is a big step. This is probably the worst I've seen. And while some human rights groups have said that there should be a public interest clause, that means that journalists can release that information if it's in the public interest, the Home Office have said, actually, no, that wouldn't be in the public interest for journalists to be able to do any of that. It would undermine national security. And of course that's not true at all. There have been, of course, there are very much reforms that need to be done when it comes to the Official Secrets Act, because the world is changing, and as the Home Office have rightly pointed out, it's very difficult to keep track of these kinds of things, of national security, in the internet age when things can just ping around at lightning speed. But that doesn't mean that you stop journalists and reporters from being able to report the facts about you as a government, even if those facts don't reflect very well on you and might negatively impact your career. And as an example of something that wouldn't have been legal, potentially, if that law was introduced, this proposed law, the whole situation with Matt Hancock, that picture of him breaking lockdown rules essentially, breaking the law and cheating on his wife, releasing that would have been illegal. And you know that it's pretty authoritarian when even the Daily Mail is concerned about it. Now, they're probably only concerned about it, and they've written an article about it, but they're only probably concerned about it because it might affect their bottom line. But still, it's pretty dire when progressives and conservatives seem to be uniting around this. Of course, this isn't a piece of legislation that's like going to the House, in the immediate future. Hopefully, this will get shot down straight away. But this government have shown that they absolutely don't care how much noise people make. They don't care how unpopular it at first seems it'll make them to pass authoritarian legislation that restricts civil liberties and civil rights, because at the end of the day it doesn't affect their polling. They're polling much, much higher than the Labour Party at the moment. I think they average about a 10-point lead in the polls, 10%. Labour are a total shambles. They are destroying themselves, as we've heard from recent reports. Their party finances are in a real state because they're spending so much money on getting contractors and getting other people in to investigate the party and investigate members of the party for various alleged abuses. Of course, anti-Semitism is a problem in the Labour Party, and so that's perfectly warranted. But a lot of it is factional stuff, which is obviously a waste of their money. And Keir Starmer has made it clear that and his entire shadow cabinet and his general secretary have made it very clear that it's all about getting rid of the left in the Labour Party, the people who believe in universal basic income, or believe in public ownership of rail, mail, water and energy, or a green industrial rebirth strategy, or reversing all NHS privatisation, a public social care option, a £10 minimum wage or higher even now. People who believe in those kind of things are Stalinists who deserve to be dead, I guess. I mean, the Labour Party is in a total shambles and they seemingly hate themselves. So it's no surprise that the government can get away with anything. Of course, we have a media who doesn't really seem to hold them to account very effectively. But even when the media is making a lot of noise, there isn't really anything that changes. So the government, I think, will pursue this. And this is a very frightening step. Let's be clear about that. This is a very, very frightening step. Because, you're only one step away at that point from incriminating people from just reporting negatively on the government anyway, because it's like undermining the national effort to do X, Y, Z, undermining the national economy, undermining national efforts to counter extremism, counter terrorism, to improve education, to improve healthcare. All they need to do is say you're undermining the government, that it's a threat to the security of X, Y, Z in the country, whatever government initiative it is, whatever public thing it is, and boom, that's now illegal, and you can't criticise them at all, right? This is literally one step away from that. And I don't like to scaremonger, but this is horrifying, and it may be in its early stages, but we absolutely know Priti Patel is a very horrendously authoritarian individual. She wants to bring back the death penalty, and as we've seen many, many times from when the death penalty is used in other places and when it used to be used in the UK, often you get it wrong and you kill somebody who's innocent. And that is truly barbaric, and even if you were 100% right, I'm not sure what it says about your society that the government is allowed to kill people. But at the end of the day, Priti Patel doesn't care, right? I think her philosophy generally is about control, about getting the population to be obedient, to be good little workers, to sit down and shut up and not ask questions or ask anything of their betters, who, quite frankly, don't need to constantly be getting yapped at by the plebs. I think that is kind of how she views the world, and this, I think, is definitely a policy she will pursue. And as we've seen, Boris Johnson and the rest of the Conservatives, no matter if it's the ones who've been recently elected in former Labour seats in the north or Conservatives elsewhere, they will go along with it. Very much so. They will go along with it. And they have, I mean, also they've compared, you know, free school meals to paying working class people to set up crack dens and brothels. You know, they have no respect for the British people. They have no respect for our rights, for our freedoms. They have absolutely zero respect for our democracy. Their party is funded by ultra-wealthy corporate donors, and they will spend every last ounce of their strength destroying our democracy if we let them, because, quite frankly, I think they've got a taste of it, and they just want more and more and more now, because it's so much easier to govern, isn't it, when there's no freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Again, I don't mean to scaremonger, but it is becoming apparent this government has some very sinister ends when it comes to civil liberties and democracy itself. So, some cheery thoughts to have. But don't despair. Absolutely can't despair. I think, you know, we all can fight this, and I think we can win. And the power of the people is much greater than you realise. So, if we get industrial action going, I think that could be a really positive start. So, as much as it might seem disconnected from that, generally, organising in a workplace is a very powerful thing, and at the moment it's clearly more powerful than electoral politics, because the Labour Party is a total shambles and the Conservative Party are going horrendously authoritarian, so there's nowhere really to turn unless you're in Scotland or potentially Wales or Northern Ireland. So yeah, join a union basically. But I'd like to know what you guys think. You know, do you think that I am just scaremongering, this isn't a big deal, or do you think it is something we should really be worried about? And what do you think we can do to try and stop it? What do you recommend, and how will you be getting involved to try and stop this policy from being implemented? Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.